So I'd like to take a second here and welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Studney. I'm the Media Relations Manager with the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. Today we are going to be doing a webinar titled Power Plant Data Mining. Our presenters today are David Schlichel, Director of Resource Planning Analysis, and Seth Feaster, expert in data analysis and visualization. So a couple of things before we begin the presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Jessica Studney, but you will see me listed as our Executive Director, Sandy Buchanan, on your GoToMeeting attendee list. So if anybody has any questions that you'd like to submit to David or Seth, please feel free to send those to me through the chat function under the name Sandy, of course. And what we'll do is I will keep all the questions, hold them till the end, and when Seth and David have finished their presentation, then I'll go ahead and share those with them and we can get some feedback from the audience. Another thing is that we ask everybody to please mute your phones so that we reduce background noise. And then finally, I want to let you know that the presentation will be made available online on IEEFA's website in the coming days. So you will have the opportunity to reference all these resources. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to David.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before we start going through the slides, we have a number of conclusions. One is that there is a lot of information about power plants, whether they be fossil, nuclear, available on the web. There are a number of data sources. Certain of those key ones are from the U.S. government, but you shouldn't despair that even if the new administration attempts to restrict data, there are other possible sources of data that we will be discussing today. If we go now to slide 2, you'll briefly see how we're going to allocate the next 40 minutes between Seth and myself and the topics we'll be discussing. Slide 3 then lists some of the information that's available about power plants on the web, ranging from the generation, whether hourly, monthly, annually, by plants, location, their emissions, the age of the plants, what they pay in property taxes, what they think they should pay if they challenge their property taxes, fuel costs and non-fuel operating costs, and annual capital expenditures. Then on slides 3 and 4, we list a number of important sources where you can find this data. 5 of those sources are in red, the rest are in blue. The red sources are the main ones we're going to be discussing today, although we will mention a couple of others. And now I will turn it back to Seth to discuss data that's available from the Energy Information Administration of the U.S. Department of Energy.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about, as David mentioned, data that's available from the EIA. It's still available as of this date, and hopefully it will be for a long time to come. There are 2 kinds of information that I want to talk about today. The first is power plant specific information. That's really for people who want to find out what's going on with a particular plant or with particular generators in that plant. The second kind of information is a little bit broader. It's about what's going on in terms of the energy mix, either nationally or in their state. I thought that might be useful. The first slide that I want to talk about is why use EIA data. The main reason is that it's comprehensive and it's very detailed. You can get information down to individual generators, generation units within power plants. You can also get power plant information aggregated. The EIA covers a lot of fuel sources very comprehensively. They provide details about each fuel in terms of production, consumption, some information about who's using it, storage, reserves, all that kind of information. They are very detailed in the electricity markets, providing information on generation, consumption, and the fuel used. So that's actually very valuable to us to figure out what's happening in terms of the changing mix of fuels used in the electric power industry. Various data sets are available weekly, monthly, annually. They also have a lot of historical data. Depends on the kind of data that you're looking at. And the EIA, as a U.S. government agency, mostly focuses on the U.S. They do some regions, but they have a lot of state and local information, as I mentioned, including specific plants and generation units. The first part that I want to talk about is the plant and generator level data that's available from EIA. And there are two forms specifically that we're going to talk about. EIA Form 923, which provides detailed plant level generation and fuel consumption, and EIA Form 860, which provides, it's much simpler than 923, it simply provides information about all the power plants that are currently operating, includes information about planned power plants and retired power plants. That information is available monthly in a preliminary form, and they revise it into annual forms. So where do you get this stuff? I'm going to guide you through where to find it. It's available on the web, as is everything, I guess, these days. So the main landing point that I want to bring your attention to is the EIA website. You can see the screen. It says EIA.gov at the top. That's the main landing page for the Energy Information Administration. The menu to go to is the Sources and Uses menu at the tab at the top. As you can see, they have a whole bunch of different fuels. We're going to concern ourselves today with the electricity section, third one down on the left. That's the first place to go to. When you go there, you go to an electricity landing page. It looks like this. Here, we're going to also go to a separate tab, the Data tab. And there are two, as you can see, there's a lot of information that can be explored here, and I encourage everyone who's listening to go and do that to try and find the things that you're specifically looking for. There's a lot of data here, but we're going to focus on two. The Form 923 data is in the section about generation and thermal output, and the Form 860 is the capacity of electric power plants choice. The first that we're going to look at is the generation and thermal output. That lands you on this page. As you can see at the top, it says Form EIA 923 detailed data. There's a lot of explanation here. I'm not going to go through that. I will go through it as I show you the data. The thing to know is that the file that I have picked out today is the most recent one, the through December monthly information that's at the top. You download it in a zip format and open it in Excel. Most of this data is downloadable in Excel format or CSV format so that you can open it in Excel. If you do that, you end up with an Excel spreadsheet that has a lot of information and 7 tabs. Okay? Again, it's fairly straightforward. You just go there, download it to your machine. This is what it looks like. It's got a plant IDs. It's a lot of code a little bit, but it shows plant names. It's pretty easy to search for a specific plant or a specific company that you might be looking for. And it's going to give you a lot of information about that plant. I am going to go and show you as an example. My first example here is generator level information. So the lines that I've highlighted are the Navajo generating station in Arizona, and you'll see there are 3 lines for that plant, and they're actually the 3 of the generators. That plant has 3 generation units, and each one of them is listed on a separate line. It gives you information about each generation unit. And here's an example of the kind of information you can get. You can find out how much each unit within that plant has generated, how much electricity each unit has generated for each month of the year. Because this is December, it shows all 12 months and the annual total here. So it's very useful to see what's happening. As you can see, in the month of February, the second generation unit produced 0 power. It was offline for some reason, produced very little in March as well. I don't know the full story behind that, but you can quickly get an assessment of how much these plants are actually running. The second example I want to give out of 923 is, and this may be of importance to a lot of people who are trying to see what's happening in terms of the energy use and where it comes from. This example here, I'm going to show both the Navajo plant, and this is the tab 5 about fuel receipts and costs. And once again, I've just gone to that tab. I've searched for the plant, and this is what comes up. Navajo actually gets all of its coal from a single mine, whereas the James Miller plant in Alabama gets it from a number of sources. And I'm going to show you that on this tab. And so it shows you, okay, where did the coal that's fueling those 2 plants come from? Navajo, it came from the Kayenta mine, which is a Peabody-owned mine, and it tells you that. It tells you exactly how much coal they got in 2016. Very useful. The James Miller plant got it from a number of different mines. Antelope and North Antelope, Black Thunder, and it tells you who that is and how much they're getting from each of those mines. That can be very useful in terms of trying to figure out what the fuel mix is and the companies that are providing fuel to a particular plant. Along with that, so you could see here on the right-hand side how much coal they got. And following that spreadsheet over, it tells you what the cost is. Now, the cost in this case is, it looks like a dollar figure, but in fact it is not. It's cents per million BTUs. But this example is, I want to talk about how you can figure out anything that's on these spreadsheets, because there's a 7th tab that says File Layout. And so right here on this page that you're looking at, it's not a clear explanation of what those numbers are. So you can go to the 7th tab, which looks like this, and it gives you a layout and description of all the data that's in the entire spreadsheet. So if there's a code, an acronym that you don't understand, it lays it all out and explains it in fairly simple English what those codes and the data quantities are. And again, this is tab 7 on the 923 form. And if we go down to the explanation about what fuel cost is, and it says here it's all costs incurred, and it's in cents per million BTU, which is, it's not a dollars per ton for coal. It's a more uniform way of defining that. So anyway, those are just some examples of the kind of information that you can find. It's a really rich data source for both plant and generator level data. The next thing that I'm going to talk about has to do with Form 860. Go through this quickly. Again, I've downloaded the most recent monthly version, and this comes straight from Excel. It's a smaller file. What you get when you open it up is you see this. It's really a list of every operating power plant and generator in the country. There's more than 20,000 of them, of all fuel types. And if you can see at the bottom, there are the operating ones, the planned ones, retired, and canceled or postponed plants. So it's a very comprehensive snapshot of what's working and what's coming or retired in terms of all the generation for electricity in the United States. I just wanted to highlight one thing here to show you the level of detail in this sheet. And it gets down, I mean, every generation point is provided in here, and I just wanted to show you how detailed it gets. There are 2 solar power, quote-unquote, plants that are here. They're on the rooftops of Goya Foods factories in New Jersey, and that's just, they're relatively small, but they're over 1 megawatt. I think that the minimum for this spreadsheet is it has to be 1 megawatt or more in terms of generation. And you can see there's these 2 plants are about 2.5 and 1.5 megawatts. But that's the level of detail that Form 860 provides. I also wanted to show you quickly the tab for planned generation facilities so that you can see what's coming, if that's the kind of research that you need to get. Here are some examples. This is just, again, a snapshot of the spreadsheet. And I wanted to show the kinds of levels that this spreadsheet shows in planned. If you look on the right-hand side where it's outlined in red, it shows the construction status. So they have a variety of different levels of construction status, whether they've gotten permits, whether construction is complete, that kind of thing. So this is what Form 860 shows. The last thing I want to talk about very quickly is the data browser, the electricity data browser, which for a lot of people that may be what they really want. This is where you get aggregated data by fuel, by state, or nationally about what's happening in the electricity markets. And that is found right at the top. It's going back to the electricity main page. The first item in the data tab is the electricity data browser. It takes you to a page that looks like this. It comes with a chart and a section at the bottom that has data. The key to this, using this tool, is the filter order tab. It allows you to change exactly what industrial sector you're looking at. It allows you to change your geography if you only want to look at your state, or if you only want to look at a particular fuel in your state. It allows you to look at that information very quickly. So I'm going to give you one quick example, and then I'll be done with this. I'm going to show you a quick way of searching. So in this example, I'm going to search just the electric power industry for all of the United States, and I'm going to look at wind power. And once you click submit, this is what you get. So it'll show you a chart of exactly what's happening for the last 16 years or so in terms of wind power generation in the United States. As you can see, it's rising nicely. And if you want to get that data, you can just hit the download tab on the right-hand side below the chart, and it will download a CSV file for you. This last page is an example of maps that I made going state by state using that wind data. And now I'm going to turn it over to David.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. I wanted to make a point that I probably should have made at the beginning, that the data sources that Seth and I are discussing today, we at IEEFA use regularly in our assessment, financial and economic assessments of individual plants, or in our reviews of what's happening in the electricity markets in terms of coal or natural gas versus renewables. I'm going to talk briefly about the Environmental Protection Agency's Air Market Program database. The EPA requires power plants to have continuous emission monitoring systems. So you can find out from the EPA website data on both plant emissions and generation. You can get it for a short period, hourly, or for month by month or year. The home page I've listed here. The slides will be available on our website after the webinar, or you can just Google EPA Air Market Program. Here's the next slide is the EPA, the AMPD homepage. You can see the variety of information you can get. You can make a query about an individual plant. The emissions under SO2 program, NOx emissions or CO2 emissions. There are various maps and reports. And there's prepackaged data sets. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the EPA. I think if you're interested, you can find your way around it. If not, our emails are on the last slide. You can ask Seth or me any questions you want. The next slide is an example of how we use the data. You can download, my example here are the annual CO2 emissions for the Prairie State Generating Station in southern Illinois, which went into service in 2012. And you can see that each year it is emitted, its CO2 emissions have grown and are quite significant. We have included this in reports and assessments that IEEFA has prepared, given out to the media, etc. I want to mention before I move on that the folks at Synapse Energy Economics have prepared a number of tools that make it easy to access and use the data that Seth has discussed from the EIA and that I've briefly noted from the EPA. We have links to the 3 tools from Synapse. One they call Cavity, the Coal Asset Valuation Tool. Another is a Clean Power Plant Planning Tool. And the third is a clickable map/database of power plants in the U.S. with information on generation capacity and emissions. I should mention in passing that the Clean Power Plant Planning Tool will almost certainly survive longer than the Clean Power Plan, unfortunately. If you have interest in or want to just have questions about the Synapse tools, please contact Patrick Knight at Synapse, and I'm sure he will link you in with the tool and answer your questions. One source we use regularly are annual filings at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, made by regulated utility companies. It's called the FERC Form 1. Contains a wide range of information from the plant owners, information about financial health, income and balance sheets, information on taxes paid to the federal taxes, state, local property taxes, regulatory expenses, off-system sales and purchases, transmission, monthly loads and sales, both among other information. There's also detailed cost information on power plants that are either wholly or jointly owned by the utility. First you go to the FERC homepage. Under the heading Documents and Filings, you look for the link to the FERC's e-library. You click on that and you'll end up at this page. And you want to go to, you want to make it's called an advanced search. It takes a little practice to get comfortable with this, but you'll do an advanced search. That takes you to the next page. It's a longer page than this, but this is the relevant portion. The filing date, if you want to look at a single year's data, you can do, generally you do it, I do it for multi-years. The Form 1s are generally filed in late March, early April for the preceding year. So in about a month we'll be getting the FERC Form 1 filings for regulated utilities for 2016. Here was an example I did for the Georgia Power Company. You can see later the text search I'm looking for is Georgia Power Company. The dates I put in were January 1st, 2014 to the date I did it, February 27th, 2017. This would get me the FERC Form 1s for 2013 because they were filed in 2014, 2013, 14, and 15. You go down to the document type further below. You'll see you click on, this is a window. You go down to Form 1 Annual Report for Major Electric Utilities. What you get is a long list of Form 1s with brief descriptions of them. It's not only the ones, in my example, you'll get not only the ones for Georgia Power Company, but you'll get other companies that mention Georgia Power Company. It's pretty easy to go through the list and click on the ones you want. In our example, Georgia Power Company. And then when you click on that PDF, it will open up a page like this. And this one is for the Alabama Power Company, which is a sister of Georgia Power. It's got hundreds of pages of data. The only page I'm really going to focus on today is, I believe it's page 402. You can look and see you'll have a wide range of data for the preceding year. So this was filed, the one we're looking at was filed in late March, early April of 2016 for the year 2015. What I find to be the most significant data, and for you, you may think differently, line 12 has net generation for the year. Line 17 has the total cost of the plant. That's useful because the total cost will change each year as the owner makes CapEx, capital expenditures on the plant, so that if you look at the 2016 total cost and the 2015 total cost, you can see how much the company spent on either environmental or non-environmental upgrades or plant equipment replacements that were necessary due to degraded structures, components, or plant equipment. These CapEx are often quite significant and something that we try to take into consideration when we do our financial and economic assessments. The next line that I consider very important is line 34, total production expenses, and then in line 35, basically what it does is it divides the total production expenses in line 34 by the net generation in line 12, and you get an average cost for the year in cents per kilowatt hour, which translates into dollars per megawatt hour. As you go further in the page, you'll see a number of other information that's useful. The heat content of row 39 is average heat content of fuel burned. Row 44 is average BTU per kilowatt hour of net generation, which gives you an average heat rate. Heat rate's a measure of how efficient a power plant burns fuel. The lower the heat rate, the more efficient the plant. Now at source, I want to focus a lot of attention on our annual and quarterly financial filings by plant owners. As I mentioned before, a lot of information are in the FERC Form 1s that are filed by regulated plant owners, regulated electric utilities. But power plants are also owned by merchant companies and by public power utilities that are unregulated, electric co-ops, or power agencies that are not regulated by any state, so therefore they don't have to file Form 1s. It's useful, however, if you're interested in a power plant owned by them, by one of those entities, or if you're interested in looking at all coal plants, it's important to have the data. And these owners generally file annual and quarterly financial or earnings filings, issue them, generally they contain information on the financial health of plant owners, again, income and balance sheets. However, they also can report the results of plant operations and plant operating costs and capital expenditures. That information is not in the EIA beyond fuel costs. There are also significant variable and fixed O&M expenses at a power plant, and there are also, as I mentioned before with the regards to FERC Form 1, there are annual CapEx expenditures. How do you find these financial statements? Google the name of the plant owner. Go to that page. You'll see that it's either called financial statements, financial reports, information for investors, something like that. I'm going to have examples from three companies that own 2 plants. First one is Homer City Generation, that owns the 3-unit Homer City coal plant in western Pennsylvania. The other example are Lakeland Electric and Orlando Utilities Commission, municipal utilities that are the joint owners of the C.D. McIntosh Unit 3 coal plant in Florida. These financial reports give different but very useful information. Okay, if you Googled Homer City Generation, this is where you'd end up. You want to click on Financial and Operational Reports, and you get to this page. Here, Homer City has a lot of filings because they went bankrupt in 2016 for the second time in 5 years. They had previously gone bankrupt in 2012. They have not yet filed a financial statement for the full year of 2016, so all we had was the statement for the first 9 months as of September 30, 2016. In there, this third quarterly financial statement, there's information, report of operations. You can see the generation of the plant. You can see other operational performance measures, equivalent availability, capacity factor, forced outage rate. The most interesting to me of this, other than the generation you can get from the EIA, these other performance measures are not available from the EIA. You could calculate a capacity factor. The average realized energy price is important because it measures how much revenue did the owner get for each megawatt hour they sold from the plant. So you can see in this example, just looking at the third quarter of 2016, the owner only realized an average of $30.51 per megawatt hour for each megawatt hour sold, down dramatically from the $37.32 it had realized the previous year. In addition, its generation was down slightly from 2,177 gigawatt hours to 2,041. If you go down, look at the first 9 months of the year, you'll see the generation drop was far more significant, from 7,478 gigawatt hours to 5,328. Now, other information, they have other information in the financial statement will show you the net income. And here you can see I've produced the data for the 9 months ending September 30, 2016, excuse me, and you can compare it to the first 9 months of the previous year. You can see at the bottom that whereas the plant made a slight profit during the first 9 months of 2015, it lost a tremendous amount of money in the first 9 months of 2016. No surprise then that they went bankrupt a second time, and you can see some of the reasons for this. Even though the capacity revenues went up slightly by $10 million, the energy costs dropped dramatically by $120 million, and that's due to, I'm going to jump back, the fact that the generation dropped and the realized energy price per megawatt hour dropped. And this is common for many, if not all, coal plants around the United States. A double whammy that they're feeling in the markets. Here's how we use the data, present the data. You can see that since late 2012, when the plant emerged from its first bankruptcy, this data for 2012 is only the last 2 or 3 weeks of that year. But you can see since it emerged from its last bankruptcy through September 30 of 2016, it basically earned no money, had no net income. I think it's maybe $2 million. And of course that's before taxes. So again, no surprise that the plant went bankrupt a second time. Turning now to the owners of the CD McIntosh unit, when I prepared a financial assessment of the unit, I was able to get data on the annual fuel and O&M costs and their total O&M costs, fuel and non-fuel O&M, and hence their total O&M costs from the annual financial statement by Lakeland Electric. Also in there, they report, if you can see the cursor, they report their CapEx for the year. These are on a fiscal year that end September 30th. At the same time, the other joint owner doesn't report costs by plant, but reports detailed information on the generation of the plant. Now, I've only copied one page, but the generation goes back, I believe, another 10 years. So you can see how the plant's operating each year, and how this happens to be 2 coal plants jointly owned by Orlando. The Orlando Utility Commission also presents other information. EAF is equivalent availability factor. E4 is equivalent forced outage rate, which is a measure of how much of the year a power plant is either completely out of service due to an unplanned problem, or has its power reduced due to an unplanned problem. Just looking at this, you can see that 2012 was a really bad year for McIntosh Unit 3. and the plant's performance has still been better, was better in 2016. I would guess for a plant of this size, you'd expect maybe a 5 or 6% E4, and Macintosh only in 1 year of the last 5 has it achieved that level, or been below that level, and an average clearly is far above it. So you can learn about plant performance. You can learn fuel costs if you don't want to go look at the Form 923, the EIA data. If you can find this information, I should say it's not in every financial report. It's only in some by some plant owners, so you need to do research to see what actually you can find. Interestingly, you see the fuel mix. Here you have a utility in a major city in Florida, a very sunny state. 49% of its fuel mix in the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2016 was cooked from coal. 42% was from natural gas. 8.5% was from nuclear, and a pitiful 1%, or less than 1%, was from renewables. This is information advocates can use. So what I did was I was able to take the cost information from Lakeland and the generation information from Orlando to come up with an average annual production cost. And you can see here that costs rose and generation declined from an earlier slide, so the average production cost per megawatt hour went up steeply. I would guess in 2015, 2016 that probably dropped some because the plant generated more megawatt hours. But it's still more expensive than generating fuel by renewables or through natural gas-fired combined cycle plants in Florida. Other good sources of data recommend the National Renewable Energy Lab and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Go to their websites. In particular, I'd mention LBNL. Every year publishes a series called Tracking the Sun. They discuss costs of solar, declining costs of solar. They also increases in technology, power purchase agreements for power from solar plants. They also do a series of reports that discuss, in particular, utility scale solar. LBNL does an annual wind technology report where they discuss cost trends, improvements in technology, PPA costs for wind around the country. NREL does a wide range of reports, as you would expect from the name, on renewable energy. The one I highlighted here is on the Navajo coal plant in Arizona. Another source I'll briefly mention are property tax filings, either by the taxing agency in terms of determining an appraised value, or in challenges by the plant owners, because due to lower energy market prices and reduced generation due to competition from renewables and natural gas, the plants aren't worth more, and so the owners come in and challenge their property tax assessments. If you look at the Monticello plant owned by Energy Future Holdings, you can see that in 2010 it was appraised for $910 million. In 2015 it was appraised for only $341 million. And Luminant, the owner of Energy Future Holdings, came back and said, no, our plant's only worth $50 million. So I'd recommend you can either talk to the state or the local county taxing agencies to find out what the plants are paying in property taxes, and it's useful information to know. Lastly, this is how you can contact Seth or me if you have questions about today's presentations or any of the other work IEEFA does. Thanks a lot. Look forward to questions.
Thank you, David and Seth. That was a great presentation. Very insightful. Do we have any questions from the audience? You can feel free to send them to me via chat message, or you can also just unmute your line and share your question now. Someone there? Can you speak up a little? Any questions? No?
Hey, David and Seth, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, this is Dan Cohn with Work. Thanks so much for this great presentation. I have a question about the Form 923 data. So I've looked through this before to mostly to identify patterns in coal receipts from mines in our neck of the woods. But when I've compared, sometimes when I compare the total receipts from a given mine in a given year, it doesn't always match the production figures from elsewhere, whether that's the company's own reports or MSHA production reports. And so, you know, taking into account exports, which is sometimes an issue but sometimes not, my question is, do all power plants report fuel receipts to EIA, and is it possible that there are some that don't?
I don't know, this is David, I don't know the answer to that. I too have found some discrepancies between the 923 data and what I'll find in an annual report or a FERC Form 1, that there'll be more. I haven't looked at the coal. Well, actually, I have looked at. You can look at the coal costs in a FERC Form 1, and I do see discrepancies, and I don't know the answer to why that is. You would think that maybe it's due to a timing difference between when they buy the coal and pay for it and when they burn it. Maybe that's
Yes,
it.
there's usually what you should find, and I'm not convinced that you will always find this, but you should find that the production figures for the mine will exceed the 923 numbers. And the reason for that is there are a couple of places where you can have some flexibility. The first is that the mine itself has a stockpile. They're not necessarily shipping out every single grain of coal that they mine. So they have some on hand, and that can fluctuate. And power plants also are going to have some inventory or stocks, as they're referred to. And so the power plants themselves may be using coal from that inventory and pulling the inventory down. I know at the end of last year, at the end of 2015, there were coal plants had huge stocks, and so they were trying to bring those levels down by buying less and burning what they had on hand. So those are two places where there are discrepancies that can be introduced.
Sure, yeah, thank you. That makes sense. And I know there's some data on stockpiles at power plants. I don't think there is the same way for mines. But anyway, thank you for that input.
And my guess is that this winter being so mild in a large portion of the country, there'll probably be fairly large stockpiles at the end of this winter as well.
It's a great question. Thank you, Dan. Do we have any other questions? Oh, okay. Well, thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you at the Energy Finance Training Session in New York in less than 2 weeks now. So again, you see that David and Seth have listed their email addresses up here, so please don't hesitate to contact them with any questions. And again, the presentation will be posted online for you for future reference. Thank you all for attending.